Yes, thanks a lot. Really great to be here. Thank you, Stella, also for being the host of today's event. And also already a big thanks to Nele and Marta from ASI for organizing and doing everything behind the scenes. I'm very happy to give you a very warm welcome. The Amsterdam Sustainability Institute is the FU's interdisciplinary and interfaculty platform where we bring together scientists from the FU that work on different issues related to sustainability and the SDGs, from the hard sciences to the social sciences, behavioral sciences, up to medicine and religion. But we're not only bringing together FU colleagues, because you might say, well, they should know each other anyway, they're in the same university, they don't. But we also like to work with external stakeholders and with partners. So I'm very excited today that we're not only having a research project, CITIES2030 with us, but also actually the topic of co-creation. How can we make knowledge that is adaptive, that is contextual, that is situated in its context, because many people argue that that is what we need, not just top-down solutions, one size fits all, but the question, what direction do we actually want to take together? And we will explore these topics, and I'm really excited on SDG 11. As Stella said, we have already a range of topics, but a lot of climate, I feel, so it's good to change this a bit and focus today on SDG 11. Before I hand over to our speakers, and we will introduce to Stella actually to introduce the speakers, I also want to say, please get involved if you're from the FU, also get involved if you're not. You can contact Nele. We have a great newsletter that will keep you up to date. And please look out for our events. We're not only doing this speaker series, we had a great one on fashion, sustainable fashion recently, and one on the Shell legal case, fantastic events. But we also have, again, more and more physical, face-to-face, real events at the FU. We had a big kickoff a couple weeks ago on one of our big impact projects. So also look out for those so that we can maybe at one point raise a glass together and discuss how we can address the sustainability crisis. Now it's back to you, Marta, for the introduction of today's topic and our fantastic speakers. Thanks already to Susanne and Stefan for being with us, and everyone enjoy.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, today's SDG Academy event is dedicated to SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. And what we see more and more is that cities and urban communities are trying to take the lead and transform their urban realities. And food is more on the table of urban sustainable transformations as never before, and slowly is included to urban agendas and urban strategies. And we also hear a lot about the rise of urban agriculture, farm-to-table business models, community-supported agriculture, and all these buzz trends that come from bottom up and really try to stimulate the system and transform it into a more sustainable future. So to get a better idea of the urban food system and what's the role of the cities and the communities in that transformation, we have invited two speakers today, and I'm really excited to have them here with us. First, we have Dr. Suzanne van Oosh. Suzanne is a postdoctoral researcher at the Vrije University of Amsterdam. Her research focuses on urban food governance, food system transformation, and sustainable development. And apart from teachings, is also currently a work package leader in the CITIES2030 Horizon project. And after that, we are very excited to have Stefan Koyman. Stefan works in the municipality of Haarlem, and he's a member of the team economics of the municipality of Haarlem. And he's majorly focused on circular economy, sustainable economic development, and sustainable investment, among other activities he's doing. And I just want to say that Haarlem is one of these city examples that really try to push the food agenda and the sustainability agenda forward and have an impact in the region. So we're really excited to hear all the current developments in the area. So I think we can start with Suzanne to share her screen and have the conversation going. And feel free to post any comments or any questions in the chat.
All right, thank you so much for that warm welcome there, Stella. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And you should all be able to see the full screen there. So today I'm going to be talking with you about food system transformation, and I'm going to be focusing particularly here on the city region. Now, my goal for today is really to give you an overview of the current developments in food system transformation. And I'm going to be zooming in on one project that is ongoing to give you a real taste of what these developments look like. And like Stella already mentioned, Stefan is working inside one of the labs associated with this project to give you a real good insight into what is happening on the ground within these regions. So before I want to dive into this current project, I'll first want to look at the core concepts, starting with the food system itself. Because the term food system is sometimes still misunderstood because it also has a lot of different definitions, and most of them are quite elaborate, so I won't go into those details here. But there are a few returning elements that I consider to be really at the core of what we mean by a food system. A food system really describes the whole thing that's made up of all the processes that are related to food. So it really runs from agriculture to processing to logistics and then into consumption. But at the same time, it's also broader than just the food value chain. So the main aim of these systems is very much to give people access to a diet that is healthy, that is safe, and that is adequate. And food systems, they are composed of subsystems. And here you can think of the agricultural system to produce food, other facilities to process and package food. And then there's also an infrastructure that would connect these different elements. But there's also a consumer network, and there's legislation that would set standards for quality and hygiene and safety. So here you already see that interaction between these different subsystems, and together they make up a food system. And lastly, any food system will be multidimensional, right? There is an economic element to it. If you just think about the industries that are involved in the production and selling of foods, and then food also has a very strong social element to it. Food can have a very strong emotional meaning to people. So I also consider here the cultural element of food. So here you can think of food festivals, certain historical meals, or food markets. And I've included here a picture of the cheese market in Gouda as one example of that cultural value of food. And then there's this environmental element to food as well, right? Because the way that we produce food and the distance that we transport food, the choices that consumers make in the supermarket, they all impact the environment in one way or another. So food, Stella already mentioned this, it's now increasingly an urban issue, right? So this is broadly recognized by government actors, but also by civil society, by the private sector, and even consumers. And that importance of urban areas, it's being driven by several trends, and the most important ones I've listed here. Global population growth is definitely a driver. It is shown in the top graph here. The global population is expected to continue to increase for like another 2 generations or so. And yeah, we just need to find a way to feed all these people throughout their entire lives. And on top of that, we have urbanization. That is also a continuing trend, with now more people living in urban areas than live in rural areas. And that switch that has happened just a few years ago. So overall, we now have 5.5 billion people living in urban areas, and this number is also expected to increase further. And then we also have increasing welfare globally, and that would impact food through changes in demand. For example, we know that when people escape poverty, one of the first things that happens when they start consuming, when that happens, is that they start consuming more meat. And really that increase in demand for animal products, then it again can drive up that environmental impact of food production, because animal products are just more impactful than plant-based products. So you see the interconnection between those trends as well. Now, despite the focus being more and more on cities, the food system itself is very much a global system. So the graph here shows that quite nicely. This is from the metabolic report from 2019, and it really shows those global trade streams of different food groups. And those black bubbles, they show the size of trade inside the region. So if you look at this, there's a few graphs that stand out straight away. We can see that Europe is relatively self-sufficient because they have a lot of trade inside the European region and relatively little outside it. On top of that, we can also see that the largest importer is China, and the largest exporters are the US and Latin America. And another point is what happened to the African region? Because there seems to be very little going on here. And that is mainly because this market remains underdeveloped. So there's a lot of potential for Africa to be a food producing nation and also to take part in this global market. But there's a lot of barriers that are preventing this. Now, this is a whole different topic, right? But it's very visible on this graph. Right. But despite the fact that the food system is such a global system, the dispersion of food across the globe is far from uniform. So food security is not equal across global regions. And you can see that very clear here in these statistics. This here shows the average calorie consumption across different global regions. And here you see that North America and Europe are very much in a league of their own at the top with calorie consumption of over 3,000 calories per day, which is really worrisome in its own way. And then they have South America and Asia at slightly healthier levels, and Africa at rather low energy levels, right? And you also see that difference between Africa and the other regions then increasing in the more recent years. So overall, you can expect health issues arising because of these dispersion issues. And you can expect those both at the top end of the graph where obesity is taking over, and also at the bottom end where you might see more malnutrition in poorer regions. Now, and I've done the same for protein supply here. Now I included protein here because it's a really important macronutrient, especially for children. It's absolutely necessary for children to grow and develop their bodies, and particularly for brain development. So without adequate protein, children may not be able to reach their full genetic potential. And that means they can be at a disadvantage. So if you look at Europe and North America, again, they're doing fine, about 100 grams of protein per day, which is really quite a lot. But then Africa, at just over 60 grams a day, it's really lagging behind, and that difference is increasing as well. So inequality is very visible here. Now, and I'm sure that just by looking at these statistics, I don't even need to plot them out on the graph separately. But yes, it's quite clear that wealthier nations are overall better off, both in terms of energy and as well as in protein. So if we plot those individual countries against the average daily intake, then that trend is very clear. So if you have more prosperity within your country or within your region, then you are more likely to have access to all these healthy diets. But I'm sure that we're also very aware of the flip side to that. As people have access to more calories, they are not necessarily more healthy. In fact, when you look at malnutrition and obesity, they often actually go hand in hand. So that is something that we definitely need to take into consideration as well when you look at those statistics. Whoop, that was a bit too fast. All right. So if we look at that global food system then from more of an environmental economics perspective, right? This is a very different way of looking at the food system, because in economics, the focus would be very much on the market value, whereas in environmental economics, the other effects of economic activity can also be taken into account. So here's a study that is a really good example of that. So here I quantified the value of the global food system. And in addition to that, this study also estimated the externalized costs that is associated with the global food system. So the market value of the global food system here is estimated at $10 trillion US. And the main question that an environmental economist would ask themselves is how much of that is actually real value? or what remains if you take into consideration the external costs of the food system. So then you can start by deducting health costs. So this includes the cost for obesity, undernutrition, and pollution-related costs. So that has been estimated at about $6.6 trillion. Then there's also environmental costs. Here that's made up of greenhouse gas emissions, natural capital, and ecosystem service loss. Here you can deduct another 3.1 trillion. And then the total of hidden costs of the food system is then summarized, and that leads to the net value of minus $1.9 trillion globally. So the total market value will be not $10 trillion, but minus 1.9. So I would remain critical here of the actual modeled numbers, but this study gives this really clear idea of what happens when you take into account those hidden costs or simply go by market value. Okay, so that was more of a set out of the situation, let's say, at a global level. But I want to focus up more on the city region here. And the food system overall is largely undergoverned. Right, on a global level, you can consider it practically non-existent. So efforts are now going more into lower levels of governance, and the focus here is very much on city regions. And the city region food system approach is very much a way to address food system challenges on the level of the city region. And this is really a broad approach, but there are a few core elements that really stand out. So food access is the first. That should be equal to all inhabitants of the food system. So equality really is the key word here. Then the food system should also create jobs and income. The aim of that is mainly that a lively local economy can start developing. And there's really a focus on small scale production there. Next to that, we have resilience. Now, we are now in the kind of the tail end of the COVID pandemic. And that made it really painfully clear how important resilience of regions is. And also in this approach, we want to link the urban region with the rural region. And that has to do really with strengthening those relationships with more local actors. And more local solutions also help to support ecosystem and resource management kind of more efficiently. And lastly, the citizen should really play a part in this. In any CRFS initiative, you see kind of stakeholder networks being built, and these stakeholders are also actively engaged inside that process of food system transformation. So that's really one of those key elements of dealing with these issues on a city level. Now, at the moment, there is several projects ongoing, working on transformation of city region food systems inside Europe. So we call these kind of the Food 2030 family. But yeah, so we have these different projects, but unfortunately, I don't really have time to go into like these different legislation and strategies on EU level, but Food 2030 really is the EU research and innovation policy, and it specifically aims to transform food systems. And the aim is that cities can really deal with the challenges that they're facing. And the projects that are listed here, and each of these, they focus on food systems in city regions. And I really just wanted to list them here to give you an idea of kind of the current landscape of ongoing research and ongoing innovation actions. But I'm going to focus on the last project here, and that is CITIES2030. And that's a project that I've been quite directly involved with for the last 2 years or so. So this is a list of our partners. We're quite a large consortium. We have about 42 partners. Well, that was at the start of the project. More have joined. I actually could not tell you how many we have now. And this is it's a really nice mix actually that we have of different types of partners. We have municipalities across the European region. There's some technical institute as well and some consulting agencies. And then there are also a number of universities and research institutions. But there's not a focus on research here at all. CITIES2030 is what we call an innovation action project. And that means that we really focus on developing and trying out innovation in the food system rather than just doing this academic research. So the focus is really on solution finding. Now, and within CITIES2030, a lot of our activities are centered around what we call labs. These are living labs or policy labs. So not classical labs like a laboratory. This is really more on-the-ground action to make changes in food systems. So here you can see where they are on the map. Now we have a pretty good spread, both geographically and also in terms of different types of food systems. And also, this is not visible on the map, but these labs are located in a variation of regions, because some of them are really large city regions, others are quite small and more like a town with some surrounding agricultural area. And we have some labs that are quite well established. In those labs, you see that the concept of CRFS is already really well known to stakeholders, and there's like an active stakeholder network. And some of these like more experienced labs, they also have direct links to certain policy actors, so they can really actively drive forward that process of food transformation. And other labs, they're really just starting from scratch. So they have to start with bringing the need for food system transformation to the attention of stakeholders in the region. And so they need to build up a stakeholder network from the bottom up. So their focus is very different than those labs that are quite far advanced in this process. Some of them have been working there for years or decades. So there's quite a big difference there. So yeah, those labs are quite varied in nearly every aspect. And we see that in their activities as well. Like 12 of our labs are front-runner regions, and they are quite well developed. And they are really examples for the future regions that are going to join us over the next few years, because our aim is to have about 50 labs by 2024. So we have quite a lot of work to do still in finding labs to join us in the next 2 years. And what's also good to know, and mention at this point, is that every lab here really works to find their own solutions to the food system challenges in their region specifically. So they will develop solutions that work specifically for their context. Now, I already briefly mentioned the Living Lab and Policy Lab, and I want to dive into that just a little bit more. So, despite what these names say, these are not separate labs, right? They're more like different components to every one of our labs. The Living Lab here focuses very much on innovation, and here our partners, they start by getting this full understanding of their situation in the city region. So here you can think of things like a SWOT analysis, for example, or any situation analysis. And based on that assessment, they can then experiment with different solutions. Right? And business modeling plays a really large part of these experiments because they're all trialed within an economic environment. And ultimately, these are solutions that they want to be able to use and make profitable within the CRFS. And the second element here is the Policy Lab. And as the name already suggests, that is really the element of the lab that focuses on policy. And policy plays a completely different role. The focus here is not so much on experimentation of a new solution, but more on building a stakeholder network, on including citizens, on capacity building inside the stakeholder network, and on building political will to support the solutions that are trialed within the Living Lab. So often the focus here is more on small scale and bottom-up solutions. So right now, the labs are at the stage where they have done that context assessment. They have learned pretty much all they can about their own city region, about the policies that are in place or not in place, and they've gotten some stakeholders on board. And then based on all of that, they've now developed an action plan. So now we're getting through the really exciting stage of the project where they're going to start experimenting with the solutions that they think will work best in their specific CRFS. No, this is my last slide here. So having these two elements together with the policy and the living lab alongside each other, it leads to this approach that is kind of more holistic than that fragmented approach in which food systems traditionally function, right? On this slide, you see how these different elements can kind of come together in this multi-layer system that really fits the structure of a food system. So far, food system in urban regions, they're actually hardly governed, or they're part of the economic policy, and then there's a bit of health policy, but there's very little steering of the food system that's really dedicated to food system itself. So in this approach, we're using living labs to address this. And because we're letting labs kind of devise their own solutions, we also allow city regions to tailor their innovation action and their policy creation to those elements that really require action, right? Especially in those parts where action is needed. And I should also mention here that labs don't develop all of this from scratch. Other projects have been executed that also focus on food system transformation. So there are really several programs, but the most significant one that we work with in CITIES2030 is the MUFPP, or the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. Now the MUFPP is really considered leading in the food system transformation of city regions. And part of the MUFPP is also a methodology that has been developed, right? So our labs can use that MUFPP methodology, and they can build on to the experiences of the labs that have gone before them. So this is very much part of a process of building knowledge, and it does it a pretty pragmatic way. So I think Stefan is going to shed some light into how that works on the actual city level. So for now, this is really all I have time for today. So it was a really general, quick run through of food system transformation in city regions. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. I think we had a broader idea of what is an urban food system and the governance aspect of that as well. So I think I don't see any comment or question in the chat. So I think we can move on with Stefan's presentation, and after that we can dive into the discussion.
All right, thank you so much. Now what I'm going to do is try to share my screen with you. Please bear with me, because I'm a bit of a klutz with these things, so I hope that you can see it. Can everybody see this? Is this sort of coming through? Now I will do this to share it with you. Yes, that should be it, shouldn't it? Wonderful, wonderful. All right, there we go. Haarlem's transition to a sustainable food system. Let's talk about that. Let's see how that works inside a city environment. First, I'll introduce myself briefly because it was already done so graciously. Stefan Kooijman, I work for circular economy, sustainable economic development, and sustainable investment for the city of Haarlem. And next to that, I'm a member of the core team of the investment agenda for the metropolitan area of Amsterdam, and I'm also on the National Task Force for Urban Agriculture. I've been working for the municipality since 2017, and I have a background in international trade and commerce with my own company. Suzanne mentioned Africa, the underdevelopment, and we're very aware of that in the West, of course. And I'm also part of an international program where we teach local economic development in Africa. And I've been teaching in both Algeria and in Tunisia, which is fascinating to see the development that's going on there and the passion of the people to get it done right. But as Suzanne rightly said, there are many challenges, and we're not there yet, but we continue to try. All right, to understand Haarlem's policies, you have to understand Haarlem as part of a wider region. And I'm talking about the Amsterdam metropolitan area, the metropoolregio Amsterdam. Now, if you see the little map we have there, you see the red zone, which is Amsterdam, and the surrounding municipalities around it. 32 municipalities, 2 provinces, a transport authority. And this entire area basically functions as one social economic area. It is a city. I've always had trouble explaining to my American friends that we have different municipalities in Holland on such a small bit of space, because they say it's basically one big city with a few gardens in between. And for the Amsterdam metropolitan area, that is, of course, true. 2.5 million people, 300,000 businesses, 1.5 million jobs in between. Why is this important? Well, we're talking about, Suzanne already mentioned, the urbanization. And the urbanization is an issue. And in order to get things right, in correlation with all these social development, the sustainable development goals that we have to work together. If you look at the Amsterdam metropolitan area, then you see that a lot of the sustainability issues can only be solved together. If we look at mobility, if we can look at the job market, if we can look into food and food production even, which happens to the right of Amsterdam in the yellow bit, which is Almere, Lelystad, and the Flevopolder, which is beneath that. There's a lot of production there. And the food logistics that are going on, the import, the export, how do we get that sustainable as well? Well, we have to cooperate. So we have several strategies running in there, and the urbanization strategy is very important because it also deals with the way we handle public transport and how we create new public transport access to connect the several economic and social cores of this region together. And up until now, food is mentioned in those plans, but it's not a major issue. But we're getting there. We're getting there. But this is the context of Haarlem. Haarlem, of course, to the left of Amsterdam. You see there in the little red square with South Kennemerland in the little yellow pieces. And Haarlem very much functions as a core municipality for the surrounding area. Bloemendaal, Zandvoort, Heemstede. And there we have a strong connection. So we're trying to see how that region connects with Amsterdam and all the other regions to get a uniform policy where we can tackle the issues ahead. So a lot of the decisions we make, and that's why I'm mentioning this, is in the context of our position within this larger socio-economic area. City of Haarlem, well, you can see the figures over there. It's not very interesting. It's all a bit of economics. But when it gets to food, it becomes more interesting. We have 329 restaurants and diners in Haarlem. And they range from the local snack bar, as we also lovingly call them, get your snacks, but also a lot of high quality restaurants. There's really a lot. There's a lot of food culture going on in Haarlem, and that I'll get back to that later. That formed part of our policy. 48 hotels, about 111 food retail outlets, and about 65 supermarkets. Difficult to deal with, by the way, the supermarket, especially the big chains. If you want to do something with food policy, you will find supermarkets, tricky to deal with. Let's put it that way, but we'll get to that later. All right, we're a city in transition. It's about the sustainable development goals, with the circular economy, national policy, transformation to a circular economy by 2050. That's quite a goal. In Haarlem, we are even more ambitious, and our politicians have said, no, Haarlem is going to be completely circular in 2040. Well, we said as policy advisors, good luck with that one, because a circular economy is a complicated thing, and because the value chains that form our economic system reach far beyond any municipal border. Getting an entire circular economy in any city by 2040 is going to be a major challenge, but you can, of course, take the steps inside your own municipality and again in the wider area of the Amsterdam metropolitan area, so we can fight for a sustainable part of a chain over there. But a completely circular city by 2040, that's going to be rather complicated. But these big ambitions require big steps, and we're willing to take those big steps. One of the things, well, people are studying economics, I suppose, so I don't have to tell you that a lot of economics is about behavior. some of you might even say that economics is a behavioral science. It's all about choices and the choices we make. And of course, these have consequences. But we are dealing on a very basic level with the behavior of our citizens when it comes to transportation, food, textiles. What do they choose once they enter the supermarkets, etc., etc.? And changing human behavior is not a very easy thing to do. So when we started developing sustainable policies for the city and this transformation policies for circular economy, we needed a way to communicate with our citizens easily on a level that everybody has some connection with. And we also wanted to tackle the serious problems that there are. And food, of course, is a wonderful vehicle for this kind of a transition because it's a topic that everybody has some kind of connection with. I mean, we all eat every day. Well, one hopes anyway. The problems in the food chain are rather substantial. And because we wanted to engage our population on a very practical level, food became one of the spearheads in our sustainable policies. And we found there were a lot of challenges there. You know, we found a very, and you all know that, I'm going to mention them anyway, because it's tricky for a municipality to deal with these things. Unhealthy food culture, you know, there's a lot of unhealthy food going around. The consumption patterns in our Western society are absolutely disastrous. The food pricing, the entire pricing in the food system is completely unrealistic. So when we're talking about food, that people are saying, well, unhealthy food is much cheaper than healthy food. Yeah, that's not so strange if you look at the way the food system is financed, which is a bizarre world of money going on there in invisible streams. But you even have entire commodity markets where they trade entire harvests. So people are making enormous amounts of money out of this. It's a very bizarre world when it comes to finance. There is a huge distance between the consumer and the producer. You know, people have no idea where the food comes from. The connection with food in its purest form has been lost. It's all in cellophane and plastic and ready to go. And you pop it in the microwave and there it is. So the entire relationship that we have with food is deeply, deeply troubled and odd. If you think about it logically, and that's a challenge because how are you going to tell that to people? And then there's another thing which we clearly see: we have a very limited influence at a municipal level anyway on what people eat. We don't, you know, in Belgium, for instance, the municipalities are responsible for the procurement of the school meals. You know, the meals they serve in the classrooms in the municipalities. We don't have that tool, so we can't decide about, you know, what the kids in school eat. We have no control over that whatsoever. And in a free market economy, it's very difficult to influence, well, what is on offer, so to speak. You might have noticed that Haarlem has been in the news very, very recently with our intention to ban commercials for meat products. This caused an enormous outrage, of course, because everybody was screaming about freedom of expression, etc., etc. The lawyers of the municipality are in an absolute panic. They come running and say, "No, you can't do that." And it's a very funny thing how this resonated across the board. But I'll get to a bit of that later because that has everything to do, of course, with the protein transition. But I'll get to that later. So our limited influence on the food choices of our population almost completely forces us to cooperate with local initiatives and local projects to influence what's happening in our municipality. And that's why we're so very pleased with Cities 2030. All right, let's look at it from a policy point of view. What are we doing? Well, we have a policy program called Haarlem Circulaire 2040. That is the basic policy piece in which the strategic and tactical elements of a transition are being mentioned and named. And we have an actual action agenda that's more the tactical thing where the actions are mentioned in the circular economy area. And that is part of the policy program Haarlem Circulaire 2040. Now, within that circular policy framework, we've chosen and identified two major food projects, which is Cities 2030, and on the other side is the City Deal, Healthy and Sustainable Food Systems, which is a national program where we work together with several large cities like Amsterdam, Utrecht, The Hague, Rotterdam, and also Ede and Wageningen, obviously where the Agricultural University of the Netherlands is located, famous international university, lots of interesting research going on, as you probably very well know. And the City Deal is kind of, it's linked to Cities 2030, it's not exactly the same. And here we very much focus also on the protein transition. And here we're going to tackle the whole issue with the advertisement on meat. It's not so much outlawing the advertisements, the commercial side that is interesting. We're not going to ban the consumption of meat, we can't afford. But we are going to use the controversy to raise the issue and start the discussion, which is very much what we want to do, I apologize, with our entire program anyway. Engage people, get the discussion going, and get examples of the better ways to do things, the healthy and sustainable food ways. All right, there we are. As such, and this is the fascinating thing about the circular transition, our role as a government has very much changed. It used to be, well, just about, traffic lights, get the zoning permissions going, make sure that, the sewers are working. And that was a very safe area for us to be in. But the transition to a circular and sustainable economy has forced us as a government to step out of our comfort zone and engage with the population and the companies and the universities and the colleges and the initiatives to drive this change, to take the lead almost, and to stimulate those who are willing to run in front. So we've found several partners to work with us in our transition to the food system. It's a new way of working. And a lot of my colleagues are still very uncertain about that. So it requires change within the municipalities, within the governments as well, in our attitude, but also in the scope of our activities. And that's a very positive thing, I think. Well, of course, the Vrije Universiteit is our main partner in Cities 2030. Lovely cooperation, learning a lot. Also the province of Noord-Holland, the provincie, they have their own food vision. It's called Voedsel verbindt, food connects. So they're very much onto the social aspects of the food system. How can we connect people through food? And through that connection, we can engage in the process of change. So again, looking for that connection, it's so important. Then the Rabobank, one of the big banks in the Netherlands, agricultural background. The Rabobank used to be an agricultural cooperative bank. It still is in a way. They branched out, of course, but they started as a farmers bank. So their connection to the food system is very big. And because of the way they are organized, very regional approach to the organization of the bank, with regional directors that can make a lot of decisions, they're very well suited to act in the process of change on a regional and local level. National Department of Agriculture, the Agricultural Ministry, they are very much involved in the City Deal. And of course, Haarlem Food Future, which is an example of one of the bottom-up citizens initiatives that we've taken on board, who people in there, very enthusiastic, know a lot about food, have a vast network inside of the city, and they have been a great help in getting the Cities 2030 living labs done and operating them and acting as an agent for change in the city. So all these different partners are coming together, and that's one of the main things we are trying to do. So that's one of our policy instruments as well as one of our goals. First of all, you engage with the city on a very personal, a very direct level, and secondly, you exchange ideas in a way that actually helps us to make better decisions for the long run. So it's also part of our citizens participation program, which tries to increase local democracies. And if you look at that, then you can see SDG number 11, coming clearly into view, because we're tackling several issues at the same time. Also the resilience of our city, by knowing what's going on and seeing what measures we need to take to improve the resilience of our population and our companies and our institutions, which is very much what we're also trying to do with our circular economic program when we look at the businesses that we have. Well, Cities 2030, Suzanne mentioned it. By now there are 15 labs, I think it said on the website. So we're growing. That's what I got from the website anyway. And we're working towards the transformation. But Suzanne explained it wonderfully already. Just let's go to the next one. Well, as we've told you already, Haarlem started several of these labs, and with these labs, we're trying to tackle a variety of issues. And one of the things, and I very much want to say this, that our focus also within the city deal is very much the social side of things, as making healthy, sustainably produced food available to a broad section of our population. The social side is of extreme importance to us. We don't want a society where only the rich can afford the healthy foods, while the poor suffer the consequences of the international economics and the agricultural markets. We want to change that. There's a very fundamental thing in our approach in Haarlem. It's very much about how do we get people involved, but also how do we make healthy food available for all. And that requires a balance in policies that is not always, again, very easy because of our lack of instrumentation. But we're getting the results we're wanting. We're getting traction on these things. The politicians are noticing it more and more, even the national politicians, and that's a very positive thing. I'm just going to step through a couple of the labs with you. You see a couple of pictures. They're fun. Wild Harvest. It's all about biodiversity. Biodiversity is a disaster in a city area like Haarlem because we have an enormous city building program on our hands where we have to build extra housing. How many of you know that housing is a problem in the Netherlands, and especially in the west of the country? So in order to get this housing problem under control, we have an enormous amount of houses we need to build. In this Amsterdam metropolitan area that I just showed you, it's getting on to 300,000 new houses in the next 8 to 9 years, which is an incredible thing. You know, you can imagine this kind of housing pushing out the green spots in your city if you're not very careful. Well, things like the Wild Harvest, people in the city having a green space, growing stuff, growing food, growing plants, increasing biodiversity. It's beautiful to see the effect that it has on our city landscape. So from that point of view, it's a wonderful reminder to the decision makers what's happening in your city, and also looking at what happens to the soil, what the influence is of this kind of agriculture, regenerative agriculture in your city. It's very important. It's a beautiful progress. Growing vegetables, we have this beautiful, the one beneath that, we have this beautiful farm called the Herkomst, the origin. And pigs are grazing there, so it's a very natural way of processing this part of the food center. And these are wonderful examples. People are getting enthusiastic, they're coming in, they're having a look. And there is this entire circular thing going on where the pigs form a part of the ecosystem that we have in the city, pigs in a city ecosystem. And eventually the poor things, of course, because we do consume the meat, but locally as well. We're going to the local restaurants and they have a wonderful life. It's not one of those bio industries. So in the protein transition, this can also help us getting people to consume less meat. And if they do buy meat, better quality. You know, these are the things we're thinking about. Natural grazing. It's a wonderful little project and it's getting a lot of traction in the city as well. And it also helps us engage sectors of the population who would otherwise never engage with us on this level. You know, and we get to meet them and know our citizens better. Train the trainer. Now, this is a very important thing that we have in the entire circular economy. You have to go through this change, but who's going to teach it? You know, if you don't know it, it's new. So who will teach those who will teach next? And how are we going to go about it without it taking 2 generations to adapt? So this is a thing where we have 2 wonderful teachers from our communities who are teaching children how to cook sustainable and healthy foods. And we want to broaden the scope of that because many people, we talked about a toxic food culture, an unhealthy food culture. So many people don't even know how to prepare a healthy meal. And we want to change that. We want to put a lot of effort in that. And we're very happy that through CITIES2030, we can actually do that on a very accessible way for everybody. Wonderful thing, training people to train others. I see I've copied it both times. I'm sorry, it's 2 times over. It should be only once, but that's something that happens. It's a wonderful program. And we're going to expand that because we're using this CITIES2030 to look at the success of this program. And then we're also going to incorporate that into other areas where we want to teach people some things about the sustainability and the transition to a sustainable and circular economy. So for instance, in woodworks, we're talking to several of our vocational educational institutions to see how we can do that on a different level in the neighborhoods. For instance, with repair cafes, teaching people how to repair their own stuff instead of throwing it away on the garbage heap. And again, with such a program, we could be able to do that. There are just a few examples on how we can tackle this in as a municipality where we don't have the tools to force people to do it. This is also a very fascinating one. I think this is one of the last examples I have. It's an Orbisk pilot. It's about food waste, tackling food waste inside the cityscape. They have a very clever, you can see the picture over there. They have a system that you can put above your trash cans in the restaurant. You can actually measure how much food is being thrown away. And this is an experiment as well. It's a new experiment, and we're looking at how to do it for the smaller restaurants, because the system for big restaurants is already in place. But in Haarlem, because of its cityscape and the lots of small little restaurants, it's very clear that it's valuable to measure for them as well how much they waste and what we can do about them. And so we're helping our local restaurants to deal with their food waste challenges. Again, such an experiment for us is important. Not just because of the results of the actual measurement, but also the fact that we can engage with the community on this level. So for us, and I've just mentioned a couple of these experiments to give you an idea how this goes and how the people are involved in that. And for us, we're looking not just again at the results on the specific topic, but also at the results on a municipal level when it's about cooperation with businesses and the people and the organizations. We're very much interested in that because it gives us a clearer scope on how to tackle the transition as a whole. So that's also one of the values of the CITIES2030 program. And when we look at the future of this kind of thing, in our economic vision for Haarlem, which we wrote 3 years ago, we have stated that we want to turn Haarlem into a testing ground for applied innovation. We have the right infrastructure for that. Our city has the right size for that. We have a very active business community in general, not just relating to food. We have several institutions of higher education. We don't have a university as of yet, although in one of our new developments in Haarlem, we do have the University College from Germany who's opening up in Haarlem. So we're engaging with that as well. But our cooperation with the Vrije Universiteit has also shown us that for cooperation with research and educational facilities, we're not dependent on just what is on Haarlem. And there you have it again. In this Amsterdam metropolitan area, we have this cooperation with an Amsterdam University that works as if it's part of our city itself. So that too has advised us into branching out across the region to find the right partner. So we're very excited about this. And all these things, I'm telling you a lot because there's a lot more to tell, I'm afraid, but we can't get to it. So for us as a municipality, this is a learning process in how to tackle the several challenges we have, engaging with our population, and at the same time solving real problems in the real world. You know, it's not just a theoretical exercise. We're actually tackling things. So it ticks multiple boxes. And we're very excited about that. And this is a policy technique that we'll be employing for the years to come. And there's much more. And anybody wants to know more, please contact us. And I'll be happy to engage you and to show you around in Haarlem and tell you what we're doing. It's very exciting. And I look forward to doing this a lot more in the future. Thank you so much for your attention. This was my little contribution, and I didn't forget to do the disclaimer, which is good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I think it was a really good overview on what you're doing in Haarlem. And I think Haarlem is like a game changer when it comes to municipalities, because we see that it goes from just a service provider to a real collaborator with projects and other municipalities. And I think this is great when it comes to a more integrated governance that goes beyond just tackling food safety and food security and going beyond to all the 3 pillars of food sustainability. So yeah, thank you so much for that. I don't see any questions in the chat. If anyone has any comment or question, I would say that you just open the mic and address it to the 2 speakers we have today.
Yeah, I can start. Ooh, somebody else is starting. Go for it.
So I just wanted to ask if the Teaching the Teacher program is also extended to Amsterdam, or is it strictly Haarlem?
At this moment, we're trying it in Amsterdam, in Haarlem, as far as I know of. I don't know if they have a similar program somewhere in Amsterdam. I can ask my colleagues. It's a very good question. But as far as I know, this is now done with us in Haarlem. It's a specific part of our CITIES2030 effort. And I haven't heard anything similar being done in Amsterdam. It doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means I don't know.
Yeah, I also have a question for Stefan. First of all, thank you so much for your talk. I was very inspired. I especially like how you were sharing that the government has to step out of their comfort zone. And I really recognize that in my work. And that it's a learning process. And I was very happy to hear your enthusiasm about it. And I'm curious if you have any tips, because I do meet your colleagues sometimes as well. I live in Haarlem as well. What can I do to help government step out of their comfort zone and to motivate people to get this transition going?
Well, I think one of the main things is that we should be prepared to sometimes get it wrong together and to get a level of trust where we don't no incriminations. It's not about that, but that we engage on a personal level as well. We say, all right, we're in this together. We don't know everything, you don't know everything, and we have to try that. And if that's the atmosphere where you stop this rather formal relationship, where you're looking at ways to criticize each other, and oh, the government is doing this, oh, the citizens are being annoying again, you have to let that go and realize we're in together. So if anything, try to create, and that's what we've been trying to create in our living labs, also with the rest of our projects, especially with the business community, that we say, all right, let go of this rather prickly relationship we sometimes have, and let's go for a trusting relationship. And if you can get that level of communication going, and to that support, mutual support you need, I think that helps a lot in gaining each other's trust and going forward. And I think my colleagues love it. It's you know, once they've experienced it, everybody loves it because they get the same level of enthusiasm. It's really a fun thing. But that's important, to get to know each other and to trust each other. That makes it easy.
Wonderful. So I think we can close the session here. It's about time. I don't know if there is any other question. No. So thank you so much for diving into urban food systems today. And we will upload the session to the YouTube channel of ASI if everyone wants to rewatch the session. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.